World's creation in 7 days. Genesis 1. When God began to create the heavens and the earth was without shape or form. It was dark over the deep sea, and God's wind swept over the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and so light appeared. God saw how good the light was. God separated the light from the darkness. God named the light day and the darkness night. There was evening and there was morning, the first day. God said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the waters to separate the water from each other." God made the dome and separated the waters under the dome from the waters above the dome. And it happened in that way. God named the dome sky. There was evening and there was morning, the second day. God said, "Let the waters under the sky come together into one place so that the dry land can appear." And that's what happened. God named the dry land earth, and he named the gathered waters seas. God saw how good it was. God said, "Let the earth grow plant life, plants yielding seeds, and fruit trees bearing fruit with seeds inside it, each according to its kind throughout the earth." And that's what happened. The earth produced plant life, plants yielding seeds each according to its kind, and trees bearing fruit with seeds inside it, each according to its kind. God saw how good it was. There was evening and there was morning, the third day. God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night. They will mark events, sacred seasons, days, and years. There will be lights in the dome of the sky to shine on earth." And that's what happened. God made the stars in two great lights, the larger one to rule over the day and the smaller one to rule over the night. God put them in the dome of the sky to shine on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the lights from the darkness. God saw how good it was. There was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. God said, "Let the waters swarm with living things, and let the birds fly above the earth, up in the dome of the sky." God created the great sea animals and all the tiny living things that swarm in the waters, each according to its kind, and all the winged birds, each according to its kind. God saw how good it was. Then God blessed them. "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea, and let the birds multiply on the earth." There was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. God said, "Let the earth produce every kind of living stock, livestock, crawling things, and wildlife." And that's what happened. God made every kind of wildlife, every kind of livestock, and every kind of creature that crawls on the ground. God saw how good it was. Then God said, "Let us make humanity in our image to resemble us, so that they may take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the earth, and all the crawling things on earth." God created humanity in God's own image. In the divine image, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fertile and multiply. Fill the earth and master it. Take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, and everything crawling on the ground." Then God said, "I now give to you all the plants on the earth that yield seeds, and all the trees whose fruit produces seeds within it. These will be your food. To all wildlife, to all the birds in the sky, and to everything crawling on the ground, to everything that breathes, I give all the green grasses for food." And that's what happened. God saw everything he had made. It was supremely good. There was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. The heavens and the earth and all who live in them were completed. On the sixth day, God completed all the work that he had done, and on the seventh day, God rested from all the work that he had done. God blessed the seventh day, and he made it holy, because on it, God rested from all the work of creation. This is the account of the heavens and earth when they were created. As Pharaoh drew closer, the Israelites looked back and saw the Egyptians marching toward them. The Israelites were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Weren't there enough graves in Egypt that you took us away to die in the desert? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt like this? Didn't we tell you the same thing in Egypt? Leave us alone, let us work for the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to work for the Egyptians than die in the desert." But Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. Stand your ground and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never, ever see again. The Lord will fight for you. You just keep still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to get moving. As for you, lift your shepherd's rod. Stretch out your hand over the sea and split it into two so that the Israelites can go into the sea on dry ground. But me, I'll make the Egyptians stubborn so that they will go after them. And I'll gain honor at the expense of Pharaoh, all his army, his chariots, and his cavalry. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain honor at the expense of Pharaoh, his chariots, and his cavalry." God's messenger who had been in front of Israel's camp moved and went behind them. The column of cloud moved from the front and took its place behind them. It stood between Egypt's camp and Israel's camp. The cloud remained there, and when darkness fell, it lit up the night. They didn't come near each other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord pushed the sea back by a strong east wind all night, turning the sea into dry land. The waters were split in two. The Israelites walked into the sea on dry ground. The waters formed a wall from them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians chased them and went into the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and cavalry. As morning approached, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian camp from the column of lightning and cloud and threw the Egyptian camp into a panic. The Lord jammed their chariots' wheels so they wouldn't run easily. The Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites because the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water comes back and covers the Egyptians, their chariots, and their cavalry." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea at daybreak. The sea returned to its normal depth. The Egyptians were driving toward it, and the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the cavalry. Pharaoh's entire army that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. The Israelites, however, walked on dry ground through the sea. The waters formed a wall for them on their right and on their left. The Lord rescued Israel from the Egyptians that day. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the amazing power of the Lord against the Egyptians. The people were in awe of the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. When the prophet Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, all the women followed her playing tambourines and dancing. Miriam sang the refrain back to them, "Sing to the Lord for an overflowing victory. Horse and rider he threw into the sea." I will take you from the nations. I will gather you from all the countries, and I will bring you to your own fertile land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be cleansed of all your pollution. I will cleanse you of all your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove your stony heart from your body and replace it with the living one. And I will give you my spirit so that you may walk according to my regulations and carefully observe my case laws. Then you will live in the land that I gave to your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your God. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the tomb. Look, there was a great earthquake, for an angel from the Lord came down from heaven. Coming to the stone, he rolled it away and sat on it. Now his face was like lightning and his clothes as white as snow. The guards were so terrified of him that they shook with fear. and became like dead men. But the angel said to the woman, "Don't be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He isn't here because he's been raised from the dead, just as he said. Come, see the place where they laid him. Now hurry, go and tell his disciples he's been raised from the dead. He's going on ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there. I've given the message to you." With great fear and excitement, they hurried away from the tomb and ran to tell his disciples. But Jesus met them and greeted them. They came and grabbed his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go, tell my brothers that I'm going into Galilee. They will see me there." The journey to a mountaintop can be long and difficult, full of trials and tribulations and struggles. And our journey this year to Easter is much the same. This journey to Easter has felt longer than most because of all that is going on in the world around us. Lots to be said, lots of thoughts and opinions about what is happening on this Easter Sunday. But just like we have anticipated Easter through the season of Lent, the season of sacrifice to draw closer to God, we have also journeyed together through the story of Scripture, starting at the beginning in Genesis 1 with creation, and then jumping to Exodus, where we see that perfection that God created, it didn't last, that it was necessary for God to continue to intervene, to be a part of his people's story, to save. And then we also find that in the prophets, God continues to speak, like in Ezekiel, to remind his people that he is God, that they are his people, that is something to hope in, to take solace in. And we just read perhaps the pinnacle of Christianity, the story of the resurrection, the story of salvation freely offered to us, the culmination of the life of this man named Jesus, God incarnate, Messiah. Last week we talked about Palm Sunday, that he is this king that perhaps we didn't realize we needed because we were wanting something else, but he is everything we could have ever hoped for. That on Friday, a Friday that we call good, but a Friday that is dark and sad and somber and full of lament, that this Son of God willingly sacrificed himself, and that on Saturday and Sunday, his disciples and his followers were distraught. They were concerned. But on this pivotal Easter Sunday, we can say he is risen. We are thankful that these Marys, these women, were brave enough and bold enough to go to the tomb, knowing that it could cost them everything, knowing that it was guarded, that it was something that could cause them guilt by association still to this Jesus, that they could have so easily said, "You know what? I no longer want to be associated with this man that failed, this man that was killed, this man that died." But instead, the opposite happens. They see that all these interesting and subtle hints that Jesus continued to drop came to fruition, that the angel was there to say, he is risen, just like he said. That on this Easter Sunday, women were the first to preach the gospel message. That they then brought this message to the disciples. And in other gospel accounts, they were in disbelief. They didn't immediately believe it, but in the account in Matthew, we jump right to Jesus appearing to his disciples. The joy, the overwhelming excitement, the happiness that they must have felt after they went through this dark period, thinking that all was lost. Today, Easter, is the day that we celebrate by saying he is risen. Today, this morning, we can continue in this journey, this biblical narrative, the journey that gives us this overview of creation, of rebellion and exile, of restoration, all culminating into salvation. And today, especially today, we need Easter. Despite feeling overwhelmed and anxious and full of sorrow and even lamenting, much like Jesus' followers, much like his disciples must have felt, we can still cling to hope. Even if just barely, We have our fingertips on it. We can still cling to this hope that no matter what happens in this life, that we can be with our Creator and our loved ones in the next. That pain and weakness will be no more. That jealousy and greed and envy will no longer exist. That there is more to life than what we see. And right now, it's really easy to see one thing over everything else. It's really easy to focus on a pandemic. It's really easy to get concerned about, am I sick? Am I getting someone else sick? It's really easy to get distracted with these arguments and debates over whether or not churches should or should not meet, or whether the government can do this or can do that. It's really, really easy to lose sight of hope. Now, that's not to say that this is not also a time for lament. To be honest and say that it's genuinely sad that people are passing away. That it's genuinely sad and uncomfortable even sometimes to consider that people we know may catch this disease, may catch this virus, may succumb to the symptoms that it brings. But once again, salvation offers us a hope that's unique. Just like the disciples then, we today can cling to this hope and let it permeate everything in our being so that it causes us to live differently from the world around us. Every one of Jesus' disciples followed him fully and completely to the end of their life. And most of the time their life ended because they were following Jesus. But along that path, along their journey, when they continued to do the things that Jesus called them to do, lives were changed. And this Christianity thing, this following Jesus thing, this life that Jesus invites people into, it spread like wildfire because people need that hope that Jesus offers. People need this lifeblood of knowing that there's more to this life. There's more meaning, more purpose, more than just the things that I see on TV, that I read about on the internet, that my neighbor argues with me about, that my coworkers continue to send me emails about. That in this life there is a big God, that he is a creator, that he loves and cares, and he even protects, that he is a part of our life. And he loves us so much that despite ourselves, despite the story of the Bible that we briefly went over, despite how rebellious humanity is, despite the people of God never actually living up to their end of the deal, he chose to still make amends and make it possible for us to be in relationship with him. Now, I don't know what else we could have hope for, but it gives me joy and peace to know that the creator of the universe cares enough to be in a relationship with me, that he sent his son to make it possible to invite all to participate in this relationship. Now that is something to hope for. Church family, in this time, we have a simple option before us, but it's one that shapes every facet of our being. It determines how we deal with our present circumstances. Right now, maybe this is the most strain your faith has ever dealt with. Perhaps today, the question, the choice before you, the options that you have are simply, do I buy this Easter thing or not? Because on one hand, following this Jesus guy, it means I have to live like this, and I'm not always so sure that that's comfortable or convenient for me. On the other hand, it's really easy to focus on what I need, what I want, my rights, my freedoms, the things that inconvenience me, and getting mad about them. But if we truly believe in this Easter story, in this resurrection of the Son of God, that Jesus came, fully God, fully man, God incarnate, which means God with us. If we truly believe he is who he said he was, then we can't do anything but take his word so seriously, follow it unapologetically, and share with the world who this Son of God, Savior is. It's not easy, but it's a reason to have hope. The Creator of the universe wants you to be with Him. The Son of God made it possible for us to not mess this up. We can be in a relationship with the Almighty Creator of the universe. Now, at the end of Paul's letter to the 1 Corinthians, which I will allow you guys to read on your own because we have plenty of scripture we've gone over today, chapters 14 and 15, the end debate was over the resurrection. And it's interesting to me because all throughout this letter, you see time and time again their struggles, the divisions that they have, the issues they have with not seeking the right kind of wisdom, that they're just petty and prideful, easily divided, that they have all sorts of shortcomings and pitfalls. And Paul seems to do a little more than hinting that they have not taken this Easter story seriously enough. That the pinnacle of their issue is that they're debating whether or not they truly believe that Jesus is who He said He was. And he often uses himself as an example. And Paul laid his life out there for the betterment of all of these churches he wrote to, because of the hope he had in the resurrection, because of this story of salvation, because of the gospel message. And he's not the only one. Perhaps you've heard story after story in the news, and at this point you're overloaded, like I might be. Sometimes I just have to turn off the Facebooks. I don't have cable TV, so I don't really have that issue. But there are times in the day where I've done too many YouTube news clips. I've researched too many statistics, and I'm just overloaded. I feel the need to wash myself of all the negativity, the depressing, anxiety-inducing, and stressful amount of information that is sadly just the facts of our lives right now. But every now and then, some good news makes its way into the news feed. Every now and then we can see this hope embodied. We can see that it's not just a belief, but it's a way of life that affects other people in ways that are awe-striking. There was a story that I read, and it touched me. It was incredible. But it was this elder priest, one of the ones that was in the age range that was most affected by this virus. And he was an Italian priest, if I remember the story right. And he was pushing 80 years old. So the odds weren't great that he was going to be able to fight this coronavirus. And given the circumstances that he was facing, somehow it fell to him to be able to make this choice to save another. He was in a hospital that had limited ventilators, and he told his nurses, his doctors, whoever was in charge of his ventilator, to give his ventilator to a younger patient, one that maybe had more of a fighting chance. He chose to willingly sacrifice out of love for the betterment of another. Now, I haven't followed up with that story. I haven't seen any official conclusions to it, but what I had read in the story at the time was that was instrumental in that young person's life. That this child, teenage-aged person, this young person, was able to recover in a huge way because of the gift that was given by this priest. And that's just a story that I read on the news. There are also incidences of hope being embodied, of this story of Easter being lived out, of the gospel being lived and preached in our own community. Time and time again, I have people coming to me and saying, I have extra bags of food. Please let me know if there's anyone in our community that is going hungry. I will make sure that they won't. Time and time again, I hear stories of people that have been blessed with food because they were in need, and they incidentally get too much. So then they knock on neighbors' doors, following proper social distancing, and they give food to another neighbor. They continue to bless somebody else out of their overabundance of blessing. this incredible trend has continued in other arenas not food related. There are currently churches and parachurch organizations, nonprofits like CareNet, that are making it a point to figure out how they can continue to help, to love on other people by giving diapers and wipes to mothers and fathers who need to continue to keep their children clean. Despite what the grocery store shelves look like, people are being able to continue to do that because there are enough people out there living out this gospel message, embodying hope, and effectively changing lives because of a diaper. I don't know about you. Perhaps it's been a while, or maybe it hasn't, but the prospect of running out of diapers, it is a terrifying prospect, especially right now when you can't just run to the grocery store and guarantee that they're going to have some there. The stories like this don't end with just actual supplies given to people or things that people are able to bless one another with, but I'm also seeing incredible stories of people coming together to encourage, to love, to build up. If you haven't seen it, you need to YouTube it. You need to find it on the internet. At every shift change in New York, entire skyscrapers, entire apartment buildings of people just applaud. They just say, yay. And they do it because they know that those medical professionals, many of which have actually come out of retirement to volunteer to help take care of the most sick people where the city with the most cases are effectively going to war with this virus. I heard one New York doctor share a video and he said, this is what I needed. I'm ready to go. He was obviously very, very stressed and anxious going into a shift, but that was everything. He was reminded what he was doing this for. And I have a special invested interest in the medical community. I'm sure most of you know that my wife's a nurse. This has deeply affected our family to live through this coronavirus, that we have all sorts of decontamination protocols that we have implemented in our own house out of a desire for my wife to not bring home any possible coronavirus protein little molecules. But she has shared stories that are encouraging, that are embodying hope of nurses at shift changes, being permitted and even encouraged to pray for one another, to encourage one another. And it's invited to people that can participate of all sorts of faith and belief systems, that there are even people that don't necessarily subscribe to this Christian thing that want to participate in a time of prayer, in a time of encouragement, in a time of building one another up, in a time of simply sharing hope. The final thing that I want to share with you this morning that is an encouragement to me in this time of Easter, this celebration of a gift of salvation that is given, is one that is easy to overlook. Our children. Now, I actually hiked up this mountain with one of my kids, and he was a trooper. He did an amazing job. He's actually helping me video some of this sermon. Say hi, Kason.
Hi.
Now, our children, last week, you may have seen the sermon. Our children are a great source of joy in our church. And truly, I am thankful, and it gives me hope to know that we can have hope and celebrate the fact that the church, the body of Christ, the actual physical people that make up this entity are going to be okay. That our children will continue to see us here and now live out this gospel story, embody hope, and they will continue it on long after we are gone. That the story will continue. That the people of God will continue being who God has called them to be. That He will walk with us through whatever life may throw us. That He has promised He will never leave or forsake us. That He will enable us to be strengthened and encouraged. And despite maybe sometimes feeling full of sorrow and lament, He will never abandon us. That He is with us through to the end. That the choice is ours to make, church, to continue to be who God has called us to be, to take this Easter story seriously, to trust that Jesus is who he said he was, and to take on that responsibility to follow him no matter where he has called us to go. Today we can celebrate the hope we have in the resurrection. Today we can not only celebrate and believe that Jesus is who he said he was, but we can embody it in the most simple and basic ways. We can send a text to a neighbor to see if they need something from the store if we're going ourselves. We can just check on an elderly friend who might need to be looked in on occasionally. We can find creative ways to engage with our children and remind them that we love them deeply, and so does their Creator. We can continue to be who Jesus has called us to be. Despite all the emotions, despite all the anxiety, stress, fear, we can still have hope, even though it seems like sometimes this life is a little bit difficult. That truly, church, we have an incredible opportunity to be the followers Jesus has called us to be who the church is supposed to be, to share with the world what it looks like to follow a risen Savior. Because today, he is risen. And because he is risen, and because me and my son have climbed to the summit of this mountain, we have no other choice but to go and be, to be the church he has called us to be. Even if that means right now, we can't be the type of church we want to be. Even if that means we can't meet in person, we can't shake hands, we can't embrace each other in a warm hug, we can still be the church. That's my challenge for you today. Have hope in the salvation and embody it with the way you live. And trust that we serve a big God who will never leave or forsake us. One final thought. Stay tuned. Next week we'll continue this journey together to reimagine what it looks like to be the church of today, to take into consideration our current circumstances, to look at what the Bible has to say, what Jesus has called us to do, to continue to be the church. I hope you'll join with me. Join us on Wednesday nights as we discover Zoom, as we continue to journey through this at-home Bible study where the church is meeting in your living room. Don't forget, we're here, we're with you. If you're in need, if you need someone to pray for you, to talk to you, if you need groceries, if you need toilet paper, let us know. Today, he is risen means that we are not forsaken. We are not alone in our struggles. We are not alone in our strifes. Today, we can be the church. Today, our journey continues, just like me and Kason coming down this mountain. Today, being the church means that we get to live out our beliefs. We get to have hope and embody it in new and creative and sometimes challenging ways. But we can trust and rest assured that our God is with us, that he loves and cares for us, that we will never be left alone, that there is more to life than what meets the eyes. Today, rest assured and have hope, knowing that the Son of God came, died, and rose again on the third day so we could say, he is risen. Happy Easter, Shelton Church of the Nazarene.
Happy Easter.
Join us next week.